everyone. I'm so glad that everyone could hop on with us today for Barnes & Noble's Happy Ever After Hour. My name is Maggie Siciliano, though you might know me as Maggie May Be Reading on TikTok. But I feel ridiculously lucky to be able to be chatting with these three authors about all things reading, writing, and romance with your beverage of choice, obviously. So I'm just going to do a quick little housekeeping and then an intro, and then we'll dive right in. I did want to remind you guys that we're going to be taking questions kind of on the latter half of this. So please pop anything that you're interested in asking these authors in the chat or in the Q&A function, and I'll try to get to as many as I can at the end. And if you do upvote any of those questions, I'm definitely going to try and prioritize the fan favorites, so be sure to utilize that button too. But for those of you who might need a reminder, let me introduce our three incredible authors tonight. First off, we have Katee Robert. Her modern day deconstructions of our favorite Greek myths are dark, sexy, and alluring. In fact, Entertainment Weekly calls her writing unspeakably hot, which I absolutely agree with. Her newest, Cruel Seduction, is a scorchingly hot modern retelling of Aphrodite, Hephaestus, and Pandora and Adonis. Katee Roberts' Cruel Seduction, the Barnes & Noble exclusive, is actually out next week on the 8th, so keep an eye out for that. Our second author we have on today is Scarlett St. Clair, and she actually also has a Barnes & Noble exclusive that came out last week on the 25th for A Game of Gods. Told in multiple POVs, A Game of Gods is the final installment in the Hades saga by USA Today bestselling author Scarlett St. Clair. She is a fierce advocate of inclusivity in all of her creative endeavors, and her books celebrate agency, sex positivity, and female empowerment. Third, we have Simone, whose Priest collection and New Camelot series is out now. I did devour them both in less than 10 days. Known for her insightful, taboo, erotic, blistering hot romance, her fan favorite series, the Priest collection and New Camelot, were recently released in gorgeous print editions. Maureen Lanker of Entertainment Weekly called Simone consistently one of the bravest, most provocative romance authors working today. She refuses to pull her punches, blazing through taboos without so much as a backward glance. So with that all to say, I am so excited that I get to chat with the three of you all in one virtual room today. I figure we would start with a little bit of an icebreaker of just, what are we drinking? What are our drinks of choice today? Or if you don't have one, what would it be? Scarlett, I'll start with you.
Well, I ran into the kitchen and got a glass of Cabernet, which is like my go-to drink all the time.
It very much fits with your aesthetic right now. I feel
Even
like
though it's not my aesthetic. But yes.
Absolutely. What about you, Katee?
I also went and got wine, but I am drinking it out of a cauldron mug because do I own a wine glass? No, it's Riesling, like the ice wine stuff. I don't know. It's weirdly spicy and I kind of enjoy it.
That's perfect. Absolutely.
I love the mug.
Sarah, what about you?
Well, I actually just got done teaching a class at a conference that's at a public library, and I still have to drive home. So I have a LaCroix, but if I was having anything else, it would be a single malt Scotch, neat, probably Macallan 12. Not out of a cauldron, though. I do feel like Katee has me beat there. I don't have any cauldrons to drink out of.
My preferred like whiskey drinking glass is this like little mug with Olenna Tyrell on it with like sunglasses that says "Tell Cersei it was me," or "It was me." It says "It was me" on it. That is, it's in storage right now, so I did look for it, but I could not find it. But yes, that is the vibe.
She is a badass.
My queen, honestly.
Yeah, 100%.
It's way too underrated. She owns that show. Okay, I will hop in for us, starting to talk a little bit about your own books as well. I mean, we all obviously like a good escape. We all love to run into our books. And so I'm curious if you could insert yourself into any world that you have created, which, or like book or storyline, what are you like throwing yourself into?
I think you're gonna have to call on us because we're all too.
Okay, I can do that. I wasn't sure if we were going to get excited or if we were going to have to think. I'll switch it around. Sierra, how about you? How about you go with this one?
Well, I feel like I'm lucky because people don't generally die in my stories like they do in Scarlett's or Katie's. So I feel like whichever story I choose, I have like, a pretty good chance of survival. So it's more like what aesthetics I'd like. I have to think that if I was going to set myself into any story, it would probably be my Thornchapel series, which is set on like foggy, moody English moors. And right now it is like 187 degrees in the American Midwest. And so foggy moors sound great. Give me wet and moody places, please.
I could not agree more. What about you, Scarlett?
Sarah, I would pick that as well. I 100% agree. I didn't really think about this because, and then I decided I would want to be in Cordova, which is a stupid decision, but I felt like if I was there, I would hopefully be a badass and I would, be able to wield a sword and kill monsters, or maybe I would be a vampire. So, I would be like immortal. So that was my reasoning for why I would everything else is safe, but that would work. I was
about to say either way, you kind of kick ass. So I think you're good to go.
Thank you. I don't know if I could survive there, but I would try. I like to embody like Isolde's energy. So
there you go. What about you, Katie?
I would choose the world where I'd be guaranteed survival, and that would be my demon realm for my monster series, because the monsters are all very soft, and Daddy Azazel will take care of me one way or another. So
I love that. Yeah, monsters are where we are safe.
Truly.
Cool. Well, I am going to be doing a couple to everybody, and then I have a couple that I have just like specifically for certain authors. But I wanted to talk a little bit about how all of you have this kind of running theme of retellings throughout your work, like whether it's Greek mythology, Arthurian legends, Grimm's fairy tales. I'm curious what makes those worlds so fun to play around in, and is there a world that you're like, I really want to get into that one? Like what would be fun to play around with that you haven't yet? I will start with Katie. I'm going to go back to you.
Where I haven't tread, but I fully intend to at some point, is not necessarily myth retellings, but like the Celtic mythology of scary fairies, or the fae per se, because they're terrifying. And like, as much as I really enjoy reading like the sexy ones, like I like it a lot, I'm very drawn to the scary ones. And so that's something that I will be writing at some point somewhere. I'm sort of like setting up the groundwork for it now across several series, but we'll get there eventually, and they will be unredeemable villains, probably, maybe, who also do sex stuff. It's fine. Okay.
That's what we're here for. I mean, let's all be honest.
But that's what I really want, is like that horror-ish element into my romance. That's what I'm craving.
I want some scary fairy porn. I'm here for it.
Listen, give me a couple years. I'll get there.
I have to say, you are the like Speedy Gonzalez. You do write like, so it might be close to that.
We'll see how it goes.
Wishful thinking. What about you, Scarlett?
I had to reflect on this because like, why do I wanted to kind of like explore why I was interested in retelling these stories. But I have a degree in English writing, and a lot of that was literary analysis, and I'm obsessed with it. And the thing I find fascinating is just, I don't know, finding meaning in these worlds and, character motivations. And I like to see how, even though these stories were written or told several years ago, they still are very relevant. And I think they show how the world doesn't really like people in the world, we don't really change. And that's kind of what I find so fascinating. I also love to sort of take on the Grimm fairy tale Mountains Made of Glass. That was a really fun exercise for me because it was sort of this study in how to maintain a tone like the Grimm fairy tale works, and sort of like analyzing their pacing and the character development and the archetypes, and like the magic systems, because everything in a Grimm fairy tale world is very like, there's no reasoning for it. There's no like system to the magic. Everything just kind of happens to you. And I found that really interesting. So I was like, I want to write my own. And I did. So that's kind of why I do it, I think. And I'm very interested, I think, in exploring Thor and Lady Sif and Loki and Sing in particular, because I think that those narratives they've been adapted a lot in like mainstream society, but no one really thinks about the true story and the true nature of those relationships and the dynamics of this world. And I'd really like to do something with that. So
Oh yeah.
sort of my reasoning.
I'd love to see that in a different lens too.
Yeah, I think this is like another reason, Sierra. This is why I'm so fascinated by Sierra's take on, especially like Camelot, and because and you're doing Isolde and Trish and Isolde too. And I looked at that, I was like, oh, that's perfect. Like, of course, these people would be like within these roles and have these relationship dynamics. And I'm like, society has taken that and said, oh no, you have to be in monogamy. And what I love about Sierra is like, she's like, nah, like, this is totally a throuple. I love that.
I like that you just, oh, sorry. I was just going to say, you said all the smart stuff about society, but I am still hung up that you're going to be writing a hot Lady Sif. So can you like do that?
I get so mad about Marvel because they like completely ignored this badass, and it's like Jane, the human is the best. And I'm like, Lady Sif, y'all, like, come on. I don't know. So.
No, absolutely. What about you, Sierra?
Well, first of all, I think that retellings are generally because we're all horny people. And so we see something and they're like, but what if it was horny? Let me do that.
What if they were boning?
What if they were boning? All of them. But I do think that in general, from a more general creative sense, that at least for me, kind of like how a pearl grows in an oyster from like a seed of sand or dirt or like an irritant, like the thing that prompts me to do a retelling is that I love something, but I got to fix it. Like there's just one thing that I really want to fix. And so, but I actually think that we have gotten really used to in dialoguing about what we love and what we don't love on social media. We've gotten really used to sort of distilling our opinions into one thing, like into a take, right? Like, here's a take, this movie was trash. And sometimes we've kind of, I think, lost the joy of being like, but was it good trash? Or like, was part of it trashy, but part of it was really good. And so I'm kind of like trying to reconcile the parts that I love. And so I think that a retelling is really an author sort of dialoguing with an idea or a theme that they really love, and they want to kind of interrogate both what they love about it and both what is imperfect about it. But that interrogation is an act of devotion. That interrogation is an act of love. And so I do think sometimes we've gotten to a place where any interrogation is interpreted as critique and like, oh, you must have hated it because you're asking questions. But really, I see my interrogating Arthurian legend or whatever as an act of love, of affection, of fandom even.
Y'all are so much smarter than I am. I'm just like, vibes.
No.
Don't ask questions. Get in the car. Vibes.
Get in the car.
I will do it
Fast
all
and
based
Furious.
on
It is my vibe.
always aesthetic. That's how, well, here, I'll toss a very fun question because I honestly, as soon as I read this interview, Scarlett, of you talking about how you love Lord of the Rings, and
Yeah.
I immediately was like, okay, let's say you get to write a story based on any two characters in Lord of the Rings that aren't like in the like canon. They're not canonically romantically involved, but you get to write a story where they are. Who are you picking? Who are we getting together?
There's one right answer, and if you get it wrong, I'll never forgive you.
I was like, is it Gimli and Legolas?
Your
Is that
right
the
answer
answer?
Definitely Gimli and Legolas. It is the Dwelf. Yeah.
Gimli and Legolas. I also want there's one random ass character. Well, he's not random in the books. He's there all the time. But I love Glorfindel, and I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? I don't know if I should say that. Say those words. Sorry. But I was like, what are you doing? This whole like gallivanting around like Middle Earth with people, but like, what are you doing? So, but yeah, Gimli and Legolas, 100%, like, you know, or Frodo and Sam. Frodo and Sam are great, are a great couple.
And the Glorfindel lore is not very built up. So you could do a lot of things. You could be
I know.
like, BTW, Glorfindel flies, and then there would be no evidence that Glorfindel doesn't fly. So you could just go ham with it.
I do remember like
it's headcanon. Yeah.
I do remember like being so in love with like Faramir and Eowyn, and just like, and there was just one scene in the book where they like Tolkien worked this very simple kiss, and I was like obsessed. That should have been my first clue. I was going to be a romance writer.
There was just not enough women in those movies that I was like,
No.
I love this. I feel all the things. I'm so happy. Women, give me more.
Yeah, it was those moments where you were like, oh yes, this badass woman, and then you know,
I am
it's
no
like a
man.
lie.
No, you're not. Women.
Well, I feel like
100%.
in the like vein of making your own rules in these, I feel like all of you are very, like, I would describe you as rule breaker authors. Like, I would say that you will fly by the seat of your pants and do the thing that you want to do. And it obviously we love this because we get to see your like evolution both as like people and as writers. But I'm curious if there's something that like, as a reader, you wish you could explore more, that you wish there was like, if there's a specific, I don't know, dynamic or taboo that you're really interested in that you gobble up or you want to see more of. Sierra, I'll go for you.
I think that, okay, here's my problem is that I'm going to write this really bad dude. He's going to be like the worst dude you've ever met. And then like on page 20, he's making a chicken pot pie for the heroine, or he's like recycling, or he's really upset about fire safety not being followed during their pagan ritual. And so I guess I just have this problem where I'm like, I'm going to write the worst boy. Just watch me, everyone. He's going to be the worst boy. And then he starts recycling. And, but it's because I'm like incapable of writing someone who's not passionate about recycling, I guess. So I think that really my project for myself with my upcoming book, Salt Kiss, and that trilogy was like, no, damn it, Sierra, today is the day. You're going to write an anti-hero if it takes you however long it takes you. And then like my next pre-series book, that guy, he's like the last Bell brother. He's just going to be the worst. And I'm determined. I'm really going to write a bad boy this time, everyone.
And we believe you. We do.
I'm ready for it.
You can do it. You can 100% do it.
Wait, what about you, Scarlett?
I have no idea. I have no idea how to answer this question. I think I just kind of see something, and I think I love what Sierra said about like, you know, you want to fix something, and mostly what I want to fix is all of the women who are oppressed across history and moving forward. So everything I write is sort of this, you know, very angry like love letter to, you know, feminism. And you know, I think when I started writing King of Battle and Blood, like that's probably the book of my soul, and where I get, you know, angriest, and where I kind of feel most at home, ironically. And it's because I, you know, pour so much of my anger and at society into those books. So I think a lot of my stuff is just like, I think that's kind of what I'm more interested in exploring, is if I can write a book that motivates people to kind of look at their life and say like, what part of this will I no longer stand for, then that's my goal, and that's what I want to continue doing. Even with writing romance, because a lot of times, you know, we all know this, like as romance authors, like we're often made fun of, and I think that's just another form of oppression. Like you're just mad at us for writing about sex because we're women, but when a man does it, it's fine, you know, and that's stupid. So
can I just say, Scarlett, that I feel like since you are an Enneagram type 8, that you would love to write anything that someone told you not to write. They'd be
That's
like,
true.
Scarlett, don't write a fluffy rom-com. And you'd be like, watch me.
Yeah, okay, that's true. I would do that. I would definitely. I'm notorious for like, if you tell me no, I'm like, just watch me. I will definitely do that. So
Scarlett, don't write a sexy lady Sith book, please.
Yeah,
I don't want to read
that.
it.
No,
don't
we don't
do
want
it.
Yeah.
that's already on the plan, y'all. It's the plan.
What about you, Katie?
Mine is more nebulous because I am constantly on this hunt for books that feel fearless, and not fearless just for the sake of like shock value or whatever, but feel like make me giddy because I'm like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. Or like, I didn't know that I could like that. Like you made me like a thing that I would have been certain, hand to God, that I would say I don't like that thing, but then I picked up this book and now I like that thing. Case in point, Sierra made me ship question mark siblings. I don't know, but there we are, maybe. But like that sort of thing, it feels like magic when that happens, and so I'm constantly on the hunt for that, because inevitably I feel like I have to write a book in conversation with it, because it's like, oh my God, you were so fearless, this made me so giddy as a reader. Now I have something inside me that I need to like examine from a different angle, and whether that means I'm writing a stalking book because I was not into stalkers. Apparently I am now. Thanks, H.D. Carlton and Kate C. Wells. Thanks. Or, I don't super, as a general rule, love why choose romances. They just like don't always work for me. Harley the Row, The Losers, they work for me now. They work for me so hard. Now I have to write a why choose because of Harley the Row. So it's like that sort of thing where it's like, it becomes almost as compulsive, like my ADHD like hyper fixates on it, and then I have to produce something. So I'm constantly in the search for that, but that's not something that somebody can be like, oh, this was really cool, you should read that, because it's so unique to like me as a person. But I never know what's going to trigger it, and I'm always very excited when it happens.
I love that, because one of the questions I like even wrote down that I wanted to ask you was how so often that happens to me in your books. Like I remember reading, I started the Dark Olympus series when I was living in Manhattan. And of course, all of a sudden I started looking at the city in like all these different ways, because I was like, okay, Brooklyn looks way more interesting now. I'm curious, is there anything in a book that you read that you went in being like, I'm going to be against this trope, we are not going to enjoy this, or we're not going to like be into this kink, and then you come out to the end and you're like, oh, I think I might be obsessed with this?
Yeah, it happens more often than you'd think. Like I was almost backed out of daddy kink and Desperate Measures because I was a coward, and I was like, I don't think I can pull this off. I don't think that this is a thing that I will enjoy. And then now I write it like semi-regularly. And also conversely, on the far other side, I don't tend to write friends to lovers, just because the tension of enemies to lovers or that sort of thing is something that I really enjoy. But Radiant Sin is, yes, it's boss employee, but it's essentially friends to lovers. Like that's really what it is at its core. And it surprised me. And in every single book pretty much these days, because my characters really come first and they really inform the sex and how we get the journey to like the end point that I'm working towards. And so in almost every single book, I end up texting my friend and being like, I think I'm writing this kink. And in Midnight Ruin, which comes out in January, it's Apollo, or nope, it's not that. That's not what it is. It's Orpheus, Charon, and Eurydice. And I was like, I think I'm writing puppy play. I was like, I don't know about puppy play. It's not something that's ever like interested me. It's not something that I felt the need to explore. I was like, I need to do research on puppy play because this is the thing that's in this book, and it's in that book. So I get surprised pretty regularly by like the characters just sort of become their own thing, and then I have to frantically do research on the back end because I'm like, they're doing this kink now. I don't know. So yes.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's like each one is absolutely an adventure, which I like tagging along for. And I think we did lose Sierra, but I'm sure she's trying to hop back on. So I have another one for you all in your own reading. Is there something that like immediately makes you fold? Like you're reading a romance novel and like one of these characters does something or sets up this scene or this dynamic, and you're like, I'm just a sucker for this. Give me all those books. Scarlett?
Yes. Scarlett.
I'm so bad at this because I've been writing for so long. I don't have anything fresh in my head to be like, oh yeah, like I totally love that. Yeah, I do. Okay, so in real life, I think domineering alpha men are really annoying, but just like anytime they're like, no, you will not, wear, I don't know, you will not wear that dress. I'm like, yes, be that person, but not in real life. And then, yeah, I do. I love any kind of humor. I like, obviously, because that Hermes is like my BFF. So even if it's not a romantic relationship, just like best friends, like I love best friends dynamics and books. And I think there are multiple layers to all kinds of relationships. And I think sometimes we neglect, like, we're so involved, like invested in like the romance part. Looking at the best friend is sort of like, I think it says a lot about the main character. They have really great relationships with other people. Sometimes you feel like the main character in a romance is very isolated just with that one person. So when they have like a dynamic with a lot of other friends, I really enjoy that. But yeah, I don't know. I probably answered that question terribly because my brain is.
Oh, I feel the same way. It's kind of like a found like family or friend circle is just like.
Yeah, there we go. Words.
What about, also Sierra, we're glad to have you back.
Yeah. Did you guys party while I was gone? Everyone took
So
shots
much partying.
while I was gone, right?
What about you, Katie? You've had an immediate yes to that question.
I have two, and they're incredibly unhinged, but it's that fearlessness that it's like, I really like murder as a love language. I do, especially when it's like, what are you doing? They literally just like talk to me and now you just did a murder. Like, come on, like you stop murdering people. And I also really enjoy like, as much as I am perpetually on the hunt for like a true anti-hero that also is like bad, but not so bad that I'm like, ooh, I hate you. But it's one of those very taste driven things. But I really like a bad, scary, usually man, but it works for women too, that is like meets this person who's not in their lifestyle and not whatever, and just so set back on their heels that they're like, I don't like, they get a little soft and they're like, why do I have heartburn? Like, I'm just rubbing my chest. Like it must be heartburn. Like that's one of my favorite, like random little tropes. It's like, oh, he rubs his sternum because it must be heartburn. I lose it every time.
Ew, feelings. What is this? It's that sort of thing I love.
No, it's not feelings. It's heartburn.
What are feelings? I have one more that I want to throw out specifically for Sierra, and then I'm going to start diving into some of the other questions and go back and forth that we've seen them in the chat. But Sierra, I have to say, as someone who like has a deep faith and then also a deep love of like romance and like owning their sexuality, I like your Priest collection books like scratched an itch in my brain that like I didn't know that I had. It was just like this huge celebration of both like faith and sex and questions, and just like it was just something I hadn't seen done before. And so I'm curious, like, where did that come from for you? And what was the biggest surprise for you in writing those?
Well, I put in the deep research by being Catholic. But I think what a lot of people don't know about me is I actually chose Catholicism as a 12-year-old. I did not grow up in a Catholic family or even a religious family. But I did grow up in kind of a rougher part of Kansas City. And so my parents sent me to a Catholic school because it was the cheapest kind of private school around, and because they have subsidized labor with the nuns. And so when I went to that Catholic school, you had to go to mass every week. And I was like, you mean to tell me that there is a building where you walk in and you sit for an hour and you feel guilty and you smell incense and there's like a naked guy hanging at the front, and like everything about this just matches my insides perfectly. I was born to be Catholic. So I was like, I'm choosing this. But my whole life, right, I've felt this tension between the sacred and the profane, right? Like, and also the sort of friction between having a religion that is very sensual, like it's very ritualistic, it engages the five senses, and then sort of being told like, but also your body is bad. You're going to come here and you're going to worship with your body and you're going to experience God bodily, but your body is bad and you should not trust it. And that friction has been really fascinating for me my whole life. And really what kind of crystallized everything for me was in 2014. I went to the Romantic Times conference, RIP Romantic Times, and there was a panel about God and sex that maybe had like 4 other weirdos like me coming to see it. But the panelists were Tiffany Rice, who wrote the original Sinner series, Krista Desir, who is at Source Books now. She edits Scarlett and I, and Amber Beldine, who is an Episcopalian minister. And the whole panel was about writing romance that had both God and sex present on the page. What did that look like? And how do you navigate between the two? And I walked away from that feeling like I'm not alone. Other people have asked these questions and are preoccupied with it. And I want to write it. And so very like Twilight style, like 4 months later, the prologue for Priest kind of popped up in my head, just sort of fully formed. So very often an author's rough draft does not look exactly like their final draft. The rough draft of the prologue of Priest is exactly like it is now. It just kind of came out the way that it was going to be.
Oh, cool.
I just need you to know that I read the original Sinners as it was coming out, and I, honest to God, almost converted to Catholicism because of Soren.
I mean, why not, right? Right?
Legitimately was looking into it at one point, and then I was like, no, Katee. not even for like sex reasons, just because he's such a good priest. Like, he has other stuff going on. It's fine, but he's such a good priest and comes from such a place of love that I was just like, do I? No, I don't. But you know what? I thought about it.
Want to be Catholic?
This is probably like a lot for a Barnes and Noble virtual event at like, while the sun is still out. But I will say that I do think that what works about that book is that when you think about faith in God through a lens of kink, or even through a lens of sensuality, it opens up entire new doorways. So when you think about God as a dom, you're like, oh, I suddenly understand so much more about Catholicism. But same thing with like incorporating sensuality. Like, I think as soon as you start looking at faith through a sensual lens or at sex through a lens of the sacred, you're immediately opening doors that have been closed to us as just a culture because of the way, this is the ancient Greeks' fault, but the way that we separate bodies and minds. We have this idea that minds are these pure philosophical orbs. That's our real selves. And our bodies are just these silly things that we're trapped in. They have to be the vehicles for our perfect orb brains. And that's why we have to have them. But I think that when you have romance that kind of collapses the space between the two, that says, no, both are equally necessary, it's kind of powerful.
Yeah.
Totally. Especially if you're thinking of like God as like, or your body is in his image, then like you have a godly body. And so it's just like a very interesting thing to think about. I love this, guys. This is great. We're gonna look at some of the questions that we got in the chat. Okay, the most upvoted we have right now is how do you choose which scenes get POV in your dual POV books? So which, like, and I guess when do you know that like you need both sides of the equation? I mean, especially I feel like Scarlett, you with your Hades saga, you very much prioritize Hades' perspective as well. So I'm curious, like, what those two stories, like, why you needed to have both of them, or if you felt that was always necessary.
No, I didn't think it was going to be necessary. I always thought of like From a Touch of Darkness to Malice. I really felt like this was Persephone's story to tell, and I honestly didn't understand how much Hades' side would play into chaos until I started writing it. I kind of outline books, but I don't outline theories. So my brain didn't connect it until I guess I rely on discovery. The reason I wrote a Hades side is because my readers asked me to, and then I let them vote on what books they wanted first, and they wanted Game of Fate. So I did it because I knew I could write a different plot. I had this idea about Sisyphus and what he was doing with Sisyphus. And then it spiraled out of control when I started Retribution, because I realized that was sort of a play on the labors, but by the time we got to gods, I was like, oh, I need an additional 2 points of view from Dionysus and Theseus. So I kind of realized that in order to do all the things I wanted to do, those sides were necessary. And then when I got to chaos, the same thing happened. It was like the context I had given within gods and Mount required more points of view in chaos. So initially I thought it was going to be dual point of view, but as I started writing, I realized that we needed everyone's background and everyone's thoughts on, so the story could progress to completion. So yeah, it's just a sort of a weird intuitive thing, but yeah, that's how chaos ended up with like 4 points of view, I think 4 points of view. So, and I thought, man, if I had never written Hades' side, what would I have done? What would I have done? But I think it's really cool because what it does is open up the world so much, because you narrow your view of the world and your, an experience based on whose point of view you choose. And you open it up if you bring someone else in. So it's very interesting, but you also have to be careful, because if you give a point of view to someone who knows a lot, you kind of, ruin the experience for the reader, or, things like that. So
totally. And I love
lots of stuff to think about.
How other characters actually think of our main character, or like the person that I identify with. I'm like, oh, you don't think she's the good guy, do you? But what about you, Katee, Sierra? Do either of you have a strong opinion on POV?
I do it the exact opposite way. Because like I said, vibes only. And so I alternate. Most of my books are pretty equal points of view between characters. The exception actually is Cruel Seduction, just because having 4 equal points characters would have been a mess, like just for what I was trying to accomplish. So I had to keep it more tight on Aphrodite and Hephaestus, and then Adonis and Pandora got their points of view. But usually it's, okay, we had like his point of view, so now it's her point of view. And so I actually skip the story to where the next emotional beat is for the next point of view character, rather than the other way around. There are exceptions and sometimes, but like usually it's because I don't plot my books. I know the end result, and I know like where we started, and I know where the series is headed, but I just prefer to kind of like feel my way. And so it's like, okay, like, and my chapters are almost identical word count. It's the weirdest thing. Like for being so chaotic, like it's very like formulaic in as far as it's like that character 1, character 2, character 1, character 2, approximately 2,000 to 2,500 words. And that's just kind of how my brain works. But yeah, I usually skip, because like I don't like a lot of like dilly-dallying. So it's like, okay, what's the next plot point? Whose point of view should it be in? And usually it's just alternating very neatly.
I was about to say, your subconscious is doing you so many favors there. That's incredible. What about you, Sierra?
Well, I only like dilly-dallying. I would say that's like 80% of my book is like dilly-dallying in the White House, dilly-dallying in a church, dilly-dallying on a foggy moor, dilly-dallying on a Christmas movie set. So I think that I'm kind of split between you two, in that I generally do dual POV, the exception being in the Priest series. And that was kind of a conscious decision with Priest and Sinner, because those characters had the biggest like growth to do, where their love interests, Poppy and Zenny, are pretty much done like baking, right? Like they've got like a couple little things that they're changing about themselves, but who they are from start to finish is pretty similar. Zenny has one big choice to make, but she has almost all the tools she needs to make it at the beginning, because she's that kind of person. Like she knows a lot about herself already. Sean knows nothing about himself. And so he needed all of those 100,000 words to like even figure out what, like, he's the heartburn guy, right? Like why I love 0 things. And now all of a sudden I love this one thing more than anything in the world. So I think it kind of depended on that. And I sort of had set a tradition for myself where I was like, okay, the Bell Brother books, they're all male POV and that's it. And then you get these little interstitials of the love interest. But after I wrote Saint, I had so many people saying, gosh, I really wish that I could have seen Elijah's point of view. Like, I really wish I could have seen Aiden through Elijah's eyes. That I was like, maybe I've been like, I got married to the formula of only the Bell Brother telling the story, when I kind of felt that pull while I was writing Saint, that I kind of wanted it to be dual POV. So I think the next Priest book is actually going to be the first one in the series that's dual POV.
Oh, that's exciting.
Ooh.
Well, that kind of brings us around to the other question that is very upvoted, which is, of your works, which is your favorite released and unreleased, or unreleased? Sorry, we had an or.
Oh,
And
no.
I will like remedy this a little bit because it's like you don't have a favorite child. So I will say, like, which one do you like is extra special to you? I'm Scarlett. Do you have one?
Yeah, 100%. My favorite book is Mountains Made of Glass. I had so much fun writing it. I think that was like, I was supposed to be taking a break. And I was like, I just kept hearing this, in my head. And I love it so much. It's so silly. It's so fun. It's so, yeah. And it's short, And I don't write short things well, but that was just absolutely fun.
That one was meant to go down.
Yeah.
What about you, Sierra?
Can I just say that I think for the neurospicy among us, as soon as someone asks what's your like favorite anything, my brain just immediately goes blank and then populates all of these different caveats. Like, well, my favorite color on a wall is different than my favorite color for a car. Don't ask me my favorite color. What if you buy me a shirt and I don't like it but you thought I was gonna like it because I told you my favorite color. And what if it changes from week to week? Anyway, I just wanted to give you a peek inside of my panic when you asked.
I identify with this deeply.
I'm like, what if I don't have a favorite color? Am I not a person? Like, am I existentially like flawed because I don't have a favorite color? Anyway, I think my favorite series that I've written as a whole is the Thornchapel series. It's very much one of my B-sides. It's like a dark academia deep cut with like a little bit of human sacrifice. And there's something about it that just was very specific id driven for me. But my like favorite book that I've ever written is American King, because the process of it was it's when you sign up to be a writer, when you're like, one day I'm going to be a writer, and I'm going to do this job for real. It's what you think writing books is going to be like. I've had like one book like that where it truly felt like everything that I was writing was matching. I was singing my heart song, and so that experience was really powerful.
I love that. I was about to say that one. I never knew it was coming next. So I think that was the best journey as a reader to like not be able to know what's going to come up. What about you, Katie?
Much like Sierra, I have so many caveats. But okay. So usually my favorite books, like the ones that when somebody asks me my favorite, it's usually the one, oh, that's the one that I just wrote. Like that's my favorite. But when I look back over the many, many books I've written, it's my favorite. The ones that stand out that I have that like nostalgic, like, oh, feeling is usually the ones where I took big swings and like felt like I was like, oh, maybe I'm not supposed to do this, but I'm gonna. And so like the Marriage Contract, it's like, it was this book. It was the first book that like has the seeds of what I am now in it, that it was like, the heroine shoots her fiance in the first chapter. And I thought for certain my agent was going to throw it out. And she's like, no, I like it. And then I was like, oh, well, all the editors are going to be like, absolutely not. And then they weren't. And then it became a mafia series that I love very deeply. But the one that right now, currently at this very moment in time, that's my favorite is actually Hunt on Dark Waters, because the fact that I wrote a pirate book that bangs is like I am kind of doing my like course correction for Pirates of the Caribbean a little bit, just because it's like I love those movies. Like, we don't talk about the most recent one, that we don't talk about it. They did Elizabeth so dirty. Welcome to my TED Talk. Anyways, but so like the first book is kind of like my take on like Justice for Norrington, who's like a paladin who thinks he's on the right side, like the side of good, but he is certainly not. He's definitely on the side of evil. And then this book 2 is just a Selkie story with like, that's sapphic because Pirates of the Caribbean needed more women in it. And then the third book is a shifter lady, a noble himbo, and a non-binary pirate captain. Does that sound familiar? So that just, just a little like fix it fic, if you want to say, in my version. So yeah, it's just my love song to this series that's been like so instrumental in my life for like reasons. I don't know. I love those movies. So yeah. Oh, the first favorite page is the marriage contract. Which is now called Dark Succession. It just got rebranded. It's called Dark Succession. But yeah, so right now that's just because it's like my agent's like, in all my years of agenting, I have never sold a pirate book and I've always wanted to. And I'm like, we're gonna sell a pirate book. And then we did. And so like every time I like force traditional publishing to do what I want, even though it's like against market technically, I'm like, yes. So
Absolutely.
that's my favorite.
I do think that like the three of us could probably like, we kind of share this real estate, which is that, there is the market, but then I think all three of us are kind of like, well, why can't the market be what we say it is? Like, like we get to make the market, right? Like we're
Was
the
that
ones.
not like all
Like
of our journeys to publication?
Yeah.
Like literally.
Because it's like, if I want this, surely there's other people that exist in this world that want this. I'm certain of it. And so I'm going to write the thing that I think the three of us really chase joy, whether that's something that is like not necessarily conforming to like what's marketable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is part of the reason why like we are where we are right now.
Yeah.
I agree. I had to write a keynote speech, and that's essentially what it is. It's this, when you stop trying to just do what you think the traditional publishing world wants, and you do what you've always wanted to do. Like I let go of this control I thought I had to have over my writing career because they said so. And then everything fell into place. And what I thought was the best thing that what I wanted to write, people love too. And like it still took a long time for people to, for the industry to bite.
True. Well, and like, I mean, I'm very grateful for like Source Books, my editor, because she always yes ands me. It's never like, no, Katee, we can't do that. It's like, oh, you want to write an open, not polycule? Okay, go for it. Do the thing. I'm going to help you make it better. And it's so like, it's lovely being in a partnership with people who like aren't trying to yank on the reins, because it's like, no, but this is where the magic happens when I'm like jumping over a cliff, like free fall. So
and we appreciate it as readers. We love the yes ands, because it's all like, we're like, yes, go off book, go off script. We want to see it.
You just remember you said that in the future. Just remember you said that when you're like, Katee, why did you write this book that I'm so mad at you about? Remember that you told me to write with joy, and there we are.
There you go. I will keep that in my back pocket. I will say we're starting to wrap up on time. I'm going to probably ask everyone about one more question. We'll see how that goes. But I guess something I'm very curious about is in like, as you grow and change as an author, I read in an interview, Sierra, that you were talking about how just like in books, sometimes you feel like you need to get, in the beginning, you felt like you needed to get all your opinions out in that first book, or like get all of your POVs out in this certain, like in one book. But then it's great because romance authors, so often their audience desires a lot of books in one specific world. So you have a place to like get more of those thoughts out as you evolve. But I'm wondering, like, what has been your all's journey with that? Have you, Scarlett or Katee, also felt like that? Like in certain books, you're like, oh, I need to get more of my thoughts out here. Or does it feel more like a playground where you can just go back and forth?
I think it feels more like a playground that I'm just populating with things I want to do, because I also don't typically write the same main characters in more than one book. So it's like a different couple in each, that the series arc or the world gets more expansive and more like the stakes get higher. And like, I start lifting veils off of like, oh, there's an enemy in the wings waiting to come in and be like, wow. And like, oh, now this other thing's going to happen that's going to topple a domino. But the characters themselves are very confined to their book. But yeah, no, so it's just like, oh, I want to do that. Well, now I'm going to do it in the next one with these other characters. And like, how is this going to affect them who are on this different journey than the characters I just wrapped up are? So yes, playground.
I'm trying to think about that because I think I feel like I'm guided by my anger towards something. And so Sarah's like, yes, when you're
Hi,
told
Fate.
no, I
Hi,
know.
Fate.
So I don't know. What is coming to mind is Queen of Myth and Monsters, which is very much like I started reading this book called The Witch by Lisa Lister, and it talks about all the ways. It's very interesting about like what is considered magic, what was considered magic within women, which is partly intuition, and sort of how all of those things have been corrupted over time. And intuition is just, people say, oh, we're too sensitive, and so you learn not to listen to it when it's always on spot on, that kind of thing. So I kind of follow like that vein, but sometimes like, I don't know, there's another part that I feel like you do have to have a little bit of both, like the playground too, because I don't know, like you always need some sort of comic relief, I feel like in some ways. So I don't know, but predominantly I'm probably guided by like a sense of trying to say something. I don't know. And it can be something as simple as like with Isolde in the beginning, like it's okay for women to just be sexual. Like you can stop being assholes about it. Like, women are oppressed and this is the way that it happened. And how do we escape that, so I don't know.
Definitely. No, I that makes a lot of sense. I don't know, Sierra, do you want to speak any more on this, or since that
Well, I feel like, yeah, like I think you guys kind of summed it up. I really think that so for those of us who came out of like creative writing spaces in college, right? Like a lot of that emphasis is on literary fiction, and kind of the way that it works is that you're supposed to spend 10 years writing a book, and then that book becomes like your seminal work, and then maybe you spend another 10 years writing another book, and then that book becomes your seminal work. And I felt so stressed out by the idea that I would have to you saw me not be able to answer a question about a favorite color. Like there's no way that I can contain everything that I want to do and say as an artist into one work of art. And so what I find really beautiful about all genre fiction, so not just romance, but mystery, sci-fi, fantasy, is that genre fiction is expected to be fruitful and multiply, right? Like we are expected to have a series, we are expected to have a deep backlist. And so instead of looking at one book as this is everything I want to say, instead I want to be able to look back in 30 years and say, okay, this backlist, that's what I wanted to say, that everyone's horny, like that's what I wanted to do. And so that is good because of the way that my brain works. I don't write because I want to say anything. I write because I'm asking myself a question. And what you're reading is 100,000 words of me trying to figure out the answer. And usually by the time I've gotten to the answer for, say, like I get to the end of Saint and I found the answer, I have like 5 new questions. I'm like, but what about this? But what about this? And so then I have to write another book to kind of chase those down. But that said, I do think that we could probably all agree that we probably have like 4 or 5 core themes that we're kind of circling around, right? Like we have like a well that we're circling around. And for each of us, it's like, we have our 4 or 5 themes. So all of my books, I think, are united by that exploration. And that's kind of hopefully how everything will hold together after I'm dead and gone.
I really do want to just like thank you all for having such a good time on here with me, and thank you everyone for joining in, who's in the chat or who hopped on. I do want to do a little housekeeping of a reminder that Cruel Seduction, the Barnes & Noble exclusive, A Game of Gods Barnes & Noble exclusive, and the Priest Collection and New Camelot series are, along with all of their other titles, are available 24/7 on bn.com and your local Barnes & Noble stores. I know that they're going to be putting some links in the chat as well. But thank you, Scarlett, Katie, and Sierra, for making us have so much fun when we're reading, for accepting how horny we are, and for just absolutely making us feel empowered to be passionate about what brings us joy as well. So we appreciate you guys, and I hope everyone has a great night.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.